to Dead Men Talking, where we revive the brightest minds in history to discuss their greatest ideas. I'm Brandon Vogt. I am the host of the show. I'm also the founder of ClaritasU, which helps thousands of Catholics get clear and confident about their faith. Click below to learn more about ClaritasU. Today, I'm very excited to open our first series of discussions on opponents of Christianity. And today I have the joy of welcoming Friedrich Nietzsche, the great German philosopher and one of the most forceful critics of Christianity. Friedrich, well, here we are. I never thought I'd be sitting across the table from you. So welcome to Dead Men Talking.
Danke, Brandon. I must say, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about being dragged back from the dead to sit across from a Catholic. But I do appreciate your honesty. It takes courage to bring your enemy to the table.
Well, I don't know about courage. I've always enjoyed your writing, Friedrich, because you were never dull. Your books crackle with energy. They're exciting. They're hard to put down, even for believers like me. Even when I disagree with nearly every word I read, I still find myself engaged by your writing. I'm underlining many passages in your books. And I think today there's still a reason why so many young people, especially college students, are still absorbed with your work. You know how to provoke people. In fact, I think in a weird way, you forced many Christians to think more carefully about what we believe.
Well, you wouldn't be the first to say that. My fiercest critics are often my most faithful readers. It's because I don't allow anyone the comfort of laziness. If you read me honestly, you must decide. Either kill God completely or stop pretending you don't believe in him.
Well, why don't we start with that argument? You talked often about the idea of killing God. In fact, you have a way of turning up the heat on lukewarm belief or lukewarm unbelief. Probably the best example of that is your famous adage, God is dead. It's probably the phrase you're most famous for. And you said it more than once throughout your writings. It's become kind of a calling card of yours. But let's set the record straight. What did you really mean when you said God is dead?
Well, I didn't mean that a supernatural being had physically died. I meant something cultural, civilizational. In the modern West, belief in the Christian God had eroded, slowly but steadily. Yet people hadn't realized what that meant. They thought they could keep Christian morality, its values, its hopes, its dignity, without the metaphysical foundation that supported it, without God himself. But once the foundation is gone, the whole building starts to sway. That was the crisis I saw.
Right. You weren't just diagnosing atheism. You were warning us about what comes next, the spiritual vacuum that results once God is out of the picture. And I think that's what makes your critique stand out. Most modern atheists just dismiss religion as a fairy tale and they move on. But you said, no, this is serious. If you just uproot the entire tree and yet you still try to keep and enjoy its fruits, you're going to have a problem because once the tree dies, the fruit withers.
Precisely. And the tragic part is that most people didn't even notice. That's why I wrote about the madman running into the marketplace, lantern in hand, shouting, "God is dead." People laughed at him, but he wasn't making a joke or even celebrating that God was dead. He was weeping. He was the only one who understood what had truly happened.
That parable of yours always gives me chills because you're right. There's a sadness in it. It's not a moment of triumph. You weren't gloating over God's death. You were mourning the loss of meaning in the Western world.
Yes, Brandon, that's right. Because once you kill God, you don't just get rid of a theological concept. You then lose objective truth, moral certainty, metaphysical grounding. You're left with nothing but the will to power, raw, human assertion, man versus man, no gods left. And not everyone can handle that. Most people aren't strong enough to create their own meaning. They need stories. They need something transcendent.
which is exactly where Christianity steps in, because we don't believe you have to invent meaning from scratch. We believe the meaning is already there, that meaning is given to us. It's not made or crafted by ourselves. It's rooted in the very structure of reality. And when you say, we have killed God, we Christians say, yes, we have killed God, and yet he rose again in forgiving love.
And yet, what does your Christianity do with this crisis? What does it do in the face of suffering? You simply tell people to look away, to pray, to hope. Christianity comforts them with delusions of heaven and eternal justice. It coddles the weak.
No, Frederick, that's not how I see it. Christianity does not tell us to look away from suffering. It tells us to stare directly into it, because God himself did. On the cross, he didn't flinch. He entered our pain. God did not eliminate suffering. Instead, he transformed it. He made suffering itself a path of redemption.
Yes, I know the language. But still, you Christians glorify suffering. You turn it into a virtue. And that's where I draw the line. Suffering is to be overcome, not adored. And pity, this so-called Christian virtue, pity is what poisons strength. It upends nature's order.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. It's very clear from your writings, Friedrich, that you do not like pity. In fact, you wrote that pity is the practice of nihilism, that it preserves the weak. But isn't that the heart of civilization, to protect the vulnerable, to lift up the fallen? Would you call a mother's care for the sick nihilism, or a hospice nurse, or a soldier carrying a wounded brother? See, you view pity as corrosive, as something that keeps people from rising above, but we see pity as the glue of civilization. Look at all the institutions that have shaped the world: hospitals, orphanages, disaster relief. Most of those were built not on power and strength, but on pity, on compassion, on mercy, on love for the vulnerable. And it's not because Christians think that weakness is good in itself, but because we believe that every person, weak or strong, is infinitely valuable. Here, I think we get into your concept of the Übermensch, the Superman, who imposes or who transcends pity and other traditional values to create his own meaning and values. He's the strong man who rises up above the world. But our most celebrated heroes, I'm thinking of the people we admire in books and movies and in real life, they're not like this. They're the ones who sacrificed, the ones who knelt, who wept, who entered into someone else's pain. That's not weakness, Friedrich. That's strength, but of a higher kind, of a deeper kind.
But not all care is pity, Brandon. The problem with Christianity is that it raised pity into a moral virtue. As your founder said, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who suffer. Christianity tells people that to be weak is to be blessed, that to suffer is to be holy. But that's slave morality, Brandon. Guilt is a tool the weak use to tame the strong.
But sometimes guilt is good, right? For example, guilt is what stops a man from becoming a tyrant. Guilt is a check that prevents him from oppressing the poor and the vulnerable. Guilt helps a man to realize, I'm not the center of the universe.
But why should the strong man stop? Why should he not assert himself fully? His desires, his creativity, his will. The world belongs to those bold enough to take it.
Well, Friedrich, I just encourage you to take a look at history. Those bold enough to take it leave a trail of broken people behind them, and usually high piles of corpses. History is ruled by empires of strong men built on blood. Christianity proposes a different kind of kingdom, one that's rooted not in domination, but in service. You see this, I think, most clearly through our saints, the best examples of Christians up and down the centuries. Most people find the Christian saints compelling. Think of someone such as St. Francis of Assisi, who radically served the poor and even embraced lepers. He had pity on the weak, and most people admire him for it. Or a more modern example from our times, I know she was born long after you were, Friedrich, but Mother Teresa, now known as Saint Teresa of Calcutta, she spent her life picking up people from the gutters and allowing them to die with dignity. That type of love, that type of pity, to me, that's true strength. That's true love.
But Brandon, love can be an opiate, a mask, a justification for passivity, for letting the world roll over you. You call your saints strong, but they renounced life. They embraced suffering as if it was a good we should pursue.
Well, but they primarily embraced the suffering of others. That's the key nuance there. They embraced the sufferings of others, to bear it, to share it, not to glorify the suffering in itself. That's the key. Christianity does not seek out pain. We're not masochists. It's just that we don't run from suffering, and that's because there's something more important than avoiding discomfort, and that's love.
Ah, love, love, love. The word that covers all sins. But tell me this, Brandon. How many people are truly capable of such love? Isn't most charity, most love, just guilt in disguise?
Well, sometimes, sure, we're all fallen creatures, but that doesn't mean real love doesn't exist. You asked how many people can live out this love, but I'd flip the question around on you, Friedrich. How many people can be your Übermensch, your Superman? How many are strong enough to create their own values, create their own meaning, concoct their own lives without any absolutes?
Very few. But that's how it should be. Mankind needs to be led, not coddled. Not everyone deserves to thrive.
I don't know, Friedrich. That sounds too much to me like social Darwinism, just maybe more poetically put. I can't support it. Christianity insists that every person has inherent dignity and value, not because of their strength, not because of what they do, but simply because they bear the image of God. That includes the child with disabilities. That includes the elderly woman with dementia. That includes the prisoner, the beggar, the addict, all of them. They're all children of God, and they all matter, even if they're physically weak. But in your system, all those people disappear.
Yes, because those very people drain society's strength. They require care, resources, and sacrifice. Wouldn't a world of Übermenschen be more efficient, more creative, more alive?
No, I don't think so. What kind of world would that be? A world where love and mercy were shunned and only the strongest prevail? That doesn't sound alive. That sounds cold, competitive, ruthless.
Well, there's the difference. The saints you praise deny themselves. They're weak. But the Übermensch affirms himself. He's strong. The saints retreat from life. The Übermensch expands it.
But Friedrich, the saints don't retreat from life. In fact, they give their lives away. That's not withdrawal. That's heroic love. In fact, that's to live life to its fullest extent. The highest form of life is to pour yourself out for the sake of another, even if called to the point of death. That's why Jesus says a man can have no greater love than to lay down his life for his friends.
A strength that serves death. That is precisely what I reject.
No, it's a strength that defeats death by refusing to fear it. That's what you miss, Friedrich. In your world, the strong survive and thrive. But in my world, the weak are raised up. That's the revolution of Christianity.
And yet, your Christ died. On a cross, humiliated. What kind of revolution ends in execution?
One that leads to resurrection.
Brandon, you keep circling back to resurrection. It's your trump card. But what if that never happened? What if Jesus died, full stop? No empty tomb, no victory, just another deluded prophet executed by the state.
Well, if that were true, if all of that were the case, then I would agree with you. In fact, the Bible itself says the same thing you did. It says that if Christ did not rise from the dead, then in the words of St. Paul, our faith is in vain, and we are, of all people, most to be pitied. So there's the turning point. You've locked in on it. Without the resurrection, Christianity collapses. Yet with it, your entire critique of Christianity falls apart.
I don't fear collapse. I embrace it. What I fear are illusions. And you must admit, Brandon, to believe in a man rising from the dead, it sounds like mythology.
Yes, it does. However, the dying and rising of Christ is different from all other myths in one important way, namely that it's true. As C.S. Lewis said, the story of Christ is simply a true myth. It's a myth working on us in the same way as the other myths, but with this tremendous difference that it really happened. In other words, Christianity is not based on a vague hope or fantasy or fairy tale. It's rooted in history. A man named Jesus of Nazareth really lived. He was really crucified, and he really rose from the dead and came back in forgiving love. The early Christians didn't spread the message because they found it comforting, because they found it nice or emotionally consoling. They were imprisoned, tortured, killed for this message, and yet they kept proclaiming Jesus is Lord, he is risen, because they knew it was true.
So you think Jesus lives?
Yes, I know he does. He's alive. And not just as a memory, a metaphor, a symbol, but as a real person. You can really know him. And here's the key, especially for our philosophy. If Jesus is alive, then he conquered death, and death is not the end. The death is not the last word of the story. And therefore, the metaphysical abyss that you described between life and death, that abyss now has a bridge over it.
You speak of bridges, but I only see cliffs, collapse, madness.
And you aren't wrong to notice them. There are cliffs. There is madness in life. Those cliffs and examples of madness are real. But the question is, do we have to fall off of them? Or is there something or someone who can carry us over?
Brandon, during my life, I tried to hold myself back. With philosophy, with will. But the higher I climbed, the thinner the air became. And eventually, there was nothing left to breathe.
Because, Friedrich, you were climbing alone. That's the tragedy, I think, of your project. You tried to bear the weight of a godless world on your own shoulders, and no man, however brilliant, can carry that burden alone.
Right. It shattered me.
Yeah, I'd like to talk with you about that a bit if you're open to it. In your final years, Friedrich, you fell silent. I've always been intrigued by those last years of your life. You were broken. Madness took over. It's hard for me not to see that as symbolic, as if the weight of the godless world was just too much to bear, and it crushed you not only into insanity, but into silence.
Yes. I stared into the abyss, and it choked me.
Yes. You warned the world not to gaze too long into the darkness, maybe because you knew what it would do. In fact, you personally experienced it yourself. Without God, we become untethered, tormented. We become free in a loose sense, but that freedom is what causes us to go adrift.
Yes, I thought I could be strong enough, that I could face the silence and create meaning. But the silence, it grew unbearable.
Because we were not made to carry that burden alone, Friedrich. Christianity, again, does not deny suffering. It does not deny the abyss. Yet it offers someone to walk over it with us. That's why the resurrection of Christ is not an escape. It's conquest. Evil loses. Death dies. We make it across the abyss of death.
Well, if that's true, Brandon, then I was wrong. Not just in thought, but in soul.
Well, Friedrich, you don't have to stay in that abyss. You don't have to be defined by what you wrote in defiance. There's grace for all of us, and even for you, Friedrich.
Grace. I used to mock that word. It always sounded too soft to me, too forgiving.
Soft, maybe, but that doesn't mean it's weak.
No, perhaps not. Maybe it's a kind of strength I never really understood.
Or never really allowed yourself to understand.
Possibly. I'm not promising belief, Brandon, but I'm less certain of my unbelief than I was before our conversation.
Well, that's okay. Uncertainty is often when the best things begin.
I always thought I was chasing truth, but maybe all along I was just trying to outrun it.
Well, maybe it's caught up now.
Brandon, you've given me much to ponder. This has been surprisingly worthwhile. I must admit, I didn't expect to enjoy this conversation with a Catholic. And yet, here we are. It seems you still believe in transcendent meaning, in moral absolutes, in a God who not only lives, but loves. You believe Christianity isn't a crutch for the weak, but the cornerstone of human dignity. And somehow, you've managed to defend all that without sounding naive.
Well, thank you, Friedrich. I've really enjoyed our conversation too. You've always had this razor-sharp ability to expose weak foundations, to destroy half-belief or shallow thinking, and I respect that. But I'd say this, your instinct to tear down idols was right. You just tore down one too many. You didn't stop at the false gods. You also struck at the true one, too.
And you think he survived?
Yes, I do. He did survive. So in a way, you were right to say God is dead, but you missed the next part. He came back.
How very Christian of you.
I'll take that. But again, thank you, Friedrich. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Brandon. I very much enjoyed this.
And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. Stay tuned for more conversations here on Dead Men Talking. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Dead Men Talking, sponsored by ClaritasU. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you a little more about ClaritasU. ClaritasU is an online platform that I created several years ago, designed to help you discuss your Catholic faith with clarity and confidence, especially when it comes to hot-button issues. If you've ever struggled to explain your faith to a family member, a friend, or coworker, ClaritasU is for you. Nearly 10,000 Catholics have joined, and they're all becoming experts on the tough topics that everyone is talking about, including IVF, abortion, atheism, evil and suffering, transgenderism, the Eucharist, a whole lot more. There are separate video courses on each of these topics, including courses on how to draw people back to the church after they've drifted away. In fact, we have over 40 video courses inside there for you. On each topic, you'll learn all the wisdom of the church, how to answer the top objections to the Catholic view, and more importantly, exactly how to communicate that wisdom with clarity and confidence, how to be a more compelling Catholic. Each video course also features expert interviews with leading Catholic voices such as Father Mike Schmitz, Dr. Peter Kraft, Dr. Brant Petrie, and more, giving you their best tips and advice on how to share your faith in today's culture. So tons of exciting things await you inside of ClaritasU. Just click the link below to join. I look forward to seeing you inside, and even more back here for the next episode of Dead Men Talking. God bless you.